for Exit Realty Corps International and very proud member of the NDILC. We put together a list of leadership principles, and we have 10 leadership principles, and every month we go over one. Since it's March, we thought we'd honor St. Patrick's Day. I think I'm the only one that's Irish, but I'm not really sure. So we're all in green. But this month's principle is pass the torch. So it's going to be very conversational, but I thought I would share a few things that I do both personally and professionally, and then we can start the conversation going. These are all members, by the way, of the National Diversity Leadership Inclusion Council, and everyone has participated and put the effort into these principles, which I think makes it even better that everyone was part of the process of going through this. So I'm a firm believer that when you want to mentor someone, pass the torch is mentoring that next generation, helping that next generation of people. It can be anyone from children to that next generation within your organization. When we have an opportunity to give people exposure to experiences that they've never experienced before, oftentimes they find out things about themselves they didn't know. Maybe they even find their passion, that line that they want to have, and their passion of what it is and who they see they can be. One of the ways that we do that in our organization, we do a personality profile test so we can find out if people are people-oriented or if they're task-oriented. So that starts down a lane for them of where their strengths are. But we try and include them in as many things as humanly possible. We do broker owner training, which is kind of a mini MBA for real estate, a handful of times a year. And we invite all of our staff members to come in and observe. There are 26 different instructors from every walk of life. The first entire day is actually understanding yourself, understanding the power of your subconscious mind, how you think, how you process things. And a lot of times the light goes on for that next generation because they haven't been exposed to any of that before. But we always think of ways, where can we bring this person into a meeting, into a negotiation? Where can they observe or where can they shadow so that they can really learn? We also really encourage having people that are shadowing out in the field everywhere, interns, for lack of a better term, so that they can shadow in other places. And the goal is to catch people doing something good. People become what we tell them they can be. And if we just turn something 3 to 5 degrees at a different angle and show them something else that they didn't see in themselves, a real strong light goes on. And it's amazing when you are in the lane that you're supposed to be in and your values and your passion match up. Your self-discipline goes through the roof. Your willingness to grow goes through the roof. But there are a few things that we really noticed, and that is when you're in an environment of trust, when you really trust everybody, you're willing to take risks. You're willing to take risks to grow, and that's how the whole entire organization grows, not just that individual, because they feel safe enough to take chances or make suggestions and really feel part of. And the number one thing that employees want is to feel part of something better. They want to matter. And so that gives them the opportunity. From a personal level, I'm a coach in martial arts, a coach and a referee. So there's a great opportunity for bringing that next generation up. But I also taught at-risk youth for the Attorney General, and that is a great opportunity to be able to point people in a totally different direction. Kids that are literally have committed violent crimes and this is their last shot, or they become a ward of the state. And it's a really refreshing thing when you see them see something because they've never been exposed to anything positive. It's a terrific thing. During the pandemic, I've actually probably spoken to about 1,000 Girl Scouts, and I think that that's been really eye-opening of kind of CEO to CEO. I know right now they're CEOs of selling Girl Scout cookies, but at some point in time, they want to branch into something. And I have to say, I feel incredibly optimistic about the next generation. Desiree, this is Desiree Patno, who is the woman in charge. She is the chairwoman for the NDILC and president and CEO for NAWRB, and she's an incredible role model. Desiree, I'd love for you to share things that are working for you. Obviously, you've had interns even in your organization.
Yes, I have. And one of the things that are very powerful for having interns and teaching the next gen is that really bringing them up to show them that they can create their own vision. You give them the tools and let them grow because you don't know what channel they're going to take. So one of the things that I like to talk about real quickly is that it pivot a little bit in the organization is that how are we dealing with the fear? The fact is that having the ability to come alive, and there's a case that just happened a couple days ago, and a lady was coming to me and she was talking about the opportunity of passing the torch. And I said, well, let's have another rules game podcast let's talk about this. And she says, no. And I was like, why not? And because the fear factor of business opportunities, they're very restrictive. And so we're now having to go not only show them the way, but tell them why it's positive. Just because the workforce is very limited what they have opportunities to, is changing the narrative, just not showing them light, but helping them to grow in that light. So it's a very different model set that we're looking at right now, is the fear factor of their mental state of how to deal with that. So that's one of the things that we're addressing right now in the organization. It's really very, very different.
Wow. Marsha Davies is with us. She's the Chief Operating Officer for the Mortgage Bankers Association, and she actually created Empower, which I've actually been able to be present at a couple of events, and it's mind-blowing what they've done from an idea and how much that idea has grown. And I'd love for you to share some of that, Marsha.
Oh, well, thank you, Tami, and it's great to be with everybody today. One of the things I think is important for us as leaders is I think it's our responsibility when we reach the top, and whatever we define for ourselves as the top, it doesn't mean you have to be the CEO. It could mean you're a director of a department, whatever it is, that we have a responsibility to bring someone along, because when you've gotten into leadership, you should send that elevator back down for someone and create opportunity for them. And so I do think that is so important. Thank you for bringing up Empower. I've been in the real estate finance industry for more than 30 years, and it's not uncommon for an organization of companies that come together, that when you look around the room, a lot of times it was very male dominated. And I started when I was much younger, and as I worked my way up through my career, I knew there weren't as many women in the industry at the time, but the higher you went, the fewer women you saw in the room with you. And that started to shift a little bit as, we reached the last 10 years or so. When you'd go to conferences, you'd see more women, again, still many, many more men than women. But what shocked me was the women who were there didn't seem to know one another. They were so busy, kind of heads down, doing the work, making sure they're efficient while they're there, out of town or whatever. And so Empower was sparked from an idea of, I invited 75 women at random. I went through the registration list and invited them to have lunch with me, just to see if they would take the time out of a very busy conference schedule, take 1 hour for themselves to meet other women and network. And I invited those 75 women, and 150 showed up. And it made me realize that there is this hunger for us to get to know one another, to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, a safe place to share your experiences and stories. So after about a year of testing networking events, we grew into professional development opportunities. And I'm proud to say that after 5 years, we have over 24,000 people engaged in the community, and we have an online presence, as well as, when the pandemic allows us to make sure it's under control so we can travel again, we do in-person events. And I'm glad you've gotten to participate in some of them, but the goal is really to not only connect women with one another, but to create an environment where they know how to help each other and how to help the younger generation coming up. And a lot of times they will bring the women who come to Empower events, they'll bring other colleagues, younger colleagues, and get them involved early in order for them to have the opportunities that perhaps the older women in the room didn't have when they were coming up. So I've been thrilled with it. And I will tell you, when you bring women together, watch out, because it's a lot of power. And I'm telling you, the support for one another is really amazing to watch.
I love that you took that risk and invited 75 people and said, you have to start with start, right? And let's just see what happens and take it from there. I think women naturally collaborate. And so that's a terrific thing. And every one of us gets better by that experience, right? It's not just the people that you're bringing up. Who learns more, the teacher or the student? The teacher every time. So, it's always that learn it, do it, teach it, but it's grown into something explosive. There's so many people, and I'll bet that really helped a lot of people actually during the pandemic, for being able to have people to connect and reach out to.
Yes. And you know what I've witnessed, and I've been, told by other women, that when there was an issue or a problem where a woman went to another woman very vulnerable and said, I need help, women rushed to help without judgment. They were just there to support and help that person be successful. And that is a really great thing to see, because sometimes I think no matter where you are in your career, if you're struggling or you don't know if you're doing something the right way, or you're questioning yourself, you need a place to go where somebody will help you. And I think sometimes we're afraid we're going to be judged as not enough, or not, prepared, or whatever is going on in our head. And when you get a group of women who will help you through it and find out that same voice is going on in their head, it neutralizes any anxiety you have. And you're right, risk taking is a huge, huge piece of growth and opportunity. And so having safe places where you can take, whether they're little risks or big risks, are so important.
And every single step of the way, it definitely matters. Erica Courtney is here, and she was actually, I think, just put back on duty, from my understanding with Desiree. She is the CEO of Zulu Time and a 2020 vet, but she's also a major in the Army. And Erica, I know that you've been helping several of the next generation, along with having the courage to be first a few times.
Right. Yeah. It's sad. It's 2021 and I still see stories of firsts. For example, having been the first group to be cavalry, which is as old as Army tradition is, with the, the Stetson, the cowboy hat, as people call it. I saw something the other day, and it was a woman who just graduated from training, and, she's probably all of 2021. And she proudly posted a picture of her and her Stetson that she's now cavalry. And it went viral. And let's just say the majority of comments were not nice. Like a woman wearing a Stetson, and the comments, and she was just flabbergasted, like, hey, I earned this. And I was sort of like, really? I set the stage for her 20 years ago, and it's still happening. So, through my journey, kind of like Marcia was saying, I recognized, that when I had gotten out of active duty and had a break and then came back in the reserves, because I wanted to teach that next generation of what integration looks like, what being in a combat arms role looks like, as they officially lifted the ban on women in combat. And when you're talking to young women versus women like ourselves, we just want to be like one of the guys. You don't want to be different. You don't want that extra attention. And then the older you get, you realize you are different. And to celebrate, I think sometimes that femininity and what that brings to the table, because all of us have been at a table with nothing but men in the past and today. And you're looking around like, gosh, am I the only one like seeing it this way? I'm not like a genius, but what's up, and it's this perspective that women bring. And the veterans piece, following up on Marcia, I was very involved in veterans organizations and ran a national board. And I recognized that there was very few women that would show up because they got tired of the good old boys network. But when you gave them that opportunity, as she says, hey, are there any women veterans in the room? And you might get 5-10% that raise their hand. And I would say, meet at the, the back of the room. And they just collaborated, and really, you can just feel that want to connect and to share stories and figure out how we can help each other. So anyway, there is power in learning from when we were in our 20s and thinking we're all the same, and then growing up and growing older and living life and recognizing there are some barriers. but there all definitely are strengths that women bring to the table. So we need that next generation to know that and own it earlier than some of us, and not try to act like a guy to be in a guy's world.
You know, that was a really hard one. I think that I'm older than a good chunk of you that are on the line, but I remember us wearing 3-piece suits, and you know, really everything was so straight and so stiff, and it was really to try and fit in as much as you could instead of having that opportunity to be yourself. You know, I had the opportunity to meet Rebecca Steele, who, and I just want to make sure that I actually say the title correctly, who is the CEO and president of the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. And you shared your story, Rebecca, which was a mind-blowing story of what you had to go through. But I think it opened the eyes of so many people, and you strengthened so many people with your story of what transpired. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that, along with your thoughts on passing the torch.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tami. I'm so glad to be here. And it's really, really fascinating to hear all your stories. One of the things that I think is really important, and I'll just reinforce this, is sort of being honest to yourself. You know, I've talked about this a lot, because when you go through risks and challenges, you know, being who you are and being honest with yourself and being open about that is really, really important. And it's hard for, I think, a lot of younger women who are coming up in male-dominated or majority male sort of roles, whether it's operations or technology or lending industry or banking, to really be honest with themselves is a challenge. And, you know, I've had lots of challenges, none the least of which were like my role as the only woman on an executive group of leaders of one of the major mortgage companies in the early 2000s and mid 2000s. Going eyes wide open, courageous, excited, but also with desire to change things. And with change comes a lot of responsibility. So one of the things that I was always interested in doing was making change a positive thing, but also not being patient. So, you know, moving in and making change happen is one thing. Being patient with change is another thing. And, you know, unfortunately, I have had, you know, more than my fair share of challenges with my court case as a result of the Countrywide and Bank of America merger. And then, you know, taking 3.5 years to really work through that process as an individual and as a mom, single mom, was really, really challenging for me. And one of the things I just learning from that is, if you're not strong on your own and you're not honest with yourself, you won't make it through something like that, because people don't run toward you. A lot of times they run away. And, you know, that's what I found myself with moving from having a lot of people around me and supporting me to almost being alone.
Wow.
And, you know, I had always said, hey, look, I mentor people, I bring women up, I show them the way, I'm honest. And then here I was, you know, 15 years into my career, having fairly good success doing that. And I was alone. And one of the things that it taught me was surround yourself with people who care and be strong. And now on the other side of that, you know, 3 years after being, you know, put in that place in the courts, having been successful, there's still a challenge with not only women, but other professionals saying, hey, look, I don't want to be tainted by that. Not really understanding what the facts were of the case, but maybe hearing it in the press and hearing it by word of mouth. You know, working through that has really taught me a lot of things. But as a pass the torch item, I think it's really, really important to make sure that you don't let those challenges and your courage falter. Stand up, be stronger. Right now I feel like I'm in such a great position of helping millions of people get out of financial distress and manage their credit and keep their house and pay their rent and all the things, even pre-COVID, but certainly post-COVID. So pass the torch to me is really sharing a lot of very painful things that happened along the way in an otherwise very successful career, and giving others the permission to take those risks and to be open with their communications and honest and help them through that. So I wasn't the only one who has been through a difficult situation. We probably all have many, many scenarios, maybe not the same, but similar. And how we tell our story and how we're open and honest will help others be the same.
I love that. And I think that, no strong person that's made it pretty far I don't know a single person that's made it pretty far that hasn't been through stuff, right? And it's so important to have that candor and that honesty and the perspective for everybody, because they're not going to have it easy through everything either. I actually think that's so important for us to teach the next generation, because we have this huge generation of people getting a blue ribbon for showing up. And I don't know how you ever find out what you're really good at if that's what happens, right? You don't find your lane. And, obviously the people that surrounded you, that stuck with you, I'm sure that the connections are even stronger than they ever were, right? And that teaches us a lot too, probably the difference between friends and acquaintances and people that have your back and people that don't. And those are great education points, great teaching moments for passing the torch. We have Dr. Chicha Doria on the phone on the line today that is the founder of Amicus Brain, and she's an AI scientist and beyond brilliant. And what I adore is that she has this amazing positive outlook, and yet you've been first for a lot of things. And so I'd love for you to share some of that and to share ways that your company have the opportunity to be able to pass the torch. We can't hear you. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
thank you. Thank you, Tami. Yeah, it's good to be here. I loved hearing Rebecca, and one thing that struck a chord in me was the point she made about change. So as I reflected on your preamble, Tami, when you talked about the passing the torch, so we have all been alone in some fashion or the other, in some meeting or some setup, and forced to challenge the status quo. And part of being having the ability to challenge the status quo is there's a desire to bring about a change we want to see in the world. And that's what, when Rebecca was telling us about her perspective, it's a change. I think if one wants to make a deep change in the world, it is inevitable, it is important and critical that we pass the torch on. We cannot wish to, whatever changes we want to make, good changes we want to make in the world, we can't do it alone. We are part of a bigger ecosystem. And for me, that's why passing the torch has a even special meaning, because so many times in my life, in my career, so many different people have reached out and provided a helping hand and passed their knowledge to them. So I find it very important as a mark of a good leader that we prepare the bench. We pass both the good things that we have learned and also all the things that we must avoid. So I tell people, look, make your own mistakes. Don't just repeat the mistakes, because there's so much already to learn from that. So personally, some of the things that I'm doing, so I'm leading the charge in transforming the lives of caregivers with the use of technology, as dementia affects 5.8 million Americans in the country. And 2/3 of the Alzheimer's patients are women. 2/3 of the caregivers of Alzheimer's patients are women. So I felt that I'm a woman. If I cannot bring whatever gifts I have been given to address this problem, what am I here for? So we have to light the way, the world works in our own ways. So that's the mission of Amicus Brain, and we are making good progress. Alongside, I was also deeply distressed by reading about all the statistics of COVID-19 disproportionately affecting women. So I started creating this data curation boot camp. I felt that there are women who are so organized, they have skills galore, but they have been looking at hospitality industry and other service industries, and they've been affected. Why not take that native skills and turn it into jobs that are high paying, which they can do from home? And I was able to partner, to bring the idea to fruition. I was able to partner with another organization. So now we are going to host this camp, and it's surprise, and actually much to our joy, this incredible response. We thought maybe we'll get 10 people raising their hands and saying, okay, and it's all free. This is labor of love. There's no, and we got such an overwhelming response. We have cohorts for 3 of those boot camps to happen. So those are the ways in which I feel, I'm able to pass I pass the knowledge torch on to the next generation. It is very important.
I love it. Everybody has a passion, and that is so important. And I think that being able to change your skill set, use the skill set for something else that's going to pay you more and help you. I think it's all about windows of opportunity, right? You see a hole and then you figure out, are you the right person to find a way to fill that void and really have an impact and make a difference. I know, Teresa, you are last but not least. Teresa Smith is the Chief Diversity Officer for Home Services of America. And you have literally paved the way into a new role that is really making a difference. So I would love for you to share your story.
Thank you so much, Tami. And it's great to see everybody on this call. I love it. And I love your, your empowering women, empower women that you've got. Marsha, I have the same one behind me. It was a gift. So it's so exciting to see that. And for our audiences, and I really, for Latinas. So being that I grew up in Hispanic household, very dominant. I know you can relate to me too, Chitra, because we have similar experiences and how different it is even being a minority and coming into, you talk about being the low number on the poll. We are typically even lower numbers as far as when you go to big events or you are going to board meetings, you typically are, the only one. I think the biggest challenge for that is that there's always kind of like an envy or a concern that, oh, if they only can have one, then I want it to be me. And so passing the torch has been a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do, especially people of color. I'm going to be very honest with you. And I think we need to have the frank conversation about that. And I even experienced that when I started to get involved in organizations because I was really passionate about leadership and learning how to become a better leader. And I really didn't have role models within my own group that I could see. And so I just had to go out to outside sources. So Marsha, the group that you've got, everyone that's involved here and all the things that you're doing really impact and help and create those leadership skills that we need. So certainly getting involved with the chamber, which is a way that I was able to learn and get passed down the torch of leadership. And then NAWRB. And I have to talk about NAWRB because that's really my first true exposure to real leadership. And organizations like this really help develop you and create that ability to pass the torch to others. And as I was able to become president of the organization on a local level, making sure that other women and other in our group were able to also follow in the footsteps, right? Be able to feel that confidence because there is a lack of confidence. There's also that lack of believing in yourself, that imposter syndrome that I read about, right? And Marsha, and am I really good enough? Am I fooling everyone? Is it just an act? Is it, you get those feelings. And so making sure that you make those statements you can do this. You're able to, what I did, you can even do better. I mean, I know, I trust, I feel, and making sure that as you mentor, as you pass the torch, that you say, look, I did it this way. I want you to do it your way, because it doesn't matter how I did it. You may have a whole different outlook, a whole way of, and that's okay. You can make it your own personal mission to create and what you want to do. And so making sure that we do that is another way that we can pass the torch. You don't have to do it exactly like me, but I know that you've got your own style, right? Your own way of doing things, and be authentic and do it that way. So when I became national president of NAWRB, another great opportunity for me to learn. And believe me, I was scared to death when I started, right? Because here I was with a very impressive group of board of members. I had like people like Rebecca, Marsha, and Tami on the board that I was leading. And so really be developing the skills and making sure other women also developed the skills was really important to me. So we did an initiative. We started with a Latina brunch. The first year I was president of the organization, Patty Arvielo, who you all know, she's with New American Funding, the president and CEO, and she was part of our board, and Marisa Calderon, who was the executive director. And as president, we said we want to do an event that will allow women, very similar Latinas, to really understand and learn from each other. And my goal, my mission as president, was to create more women leaders on the local level so that they would feel confident enough to become presidents of their organization. And I am proud to say that as I left, I was able to inspire, because just by seeing me in that role, you make such an impact. I'm not special, I'm not different, but just because I was at that role, it inspired other women, and by them being themselves, to become leaders in their organization. And we have just a great slate now. And I see Sarah, Rodriguez, who's, Sarah Sarita, who's now the president, Daisy, we've got some great women leaders that are now moving up the chain. With that, with the role that I did with HSF, and I'm just excited about this topic. I also saw the need within our own company and created the Women Who Lead that started as a university session. And we now are a mentorship group that kind of get together at the university level. And from that, we did the Women Who Lead series. And we have got people from all over that are leadership that you don't get to see always on the mastheads of a company's website, because they may be leaders behind the scenes, but they have important critical roles. And so just the exposure, the understanding that there are women leaders, and you can do this no matter where you are, whether it's whether it's in intelligence, it's STEM, it's in the mortgage industry, that there are opportunities, and that all of you have that chance, that voice, and we have the opportunity to pass that torch to all of those that are watching us, to be able to inspire them to take that leap, because all it takes is that leap. So that's all I could go on and on because I love this.
Did you take a breath at least?
Take a breath now, right?
Yeah,
It's that Latina excitement.
Love seeing the passion, and look at how much you've grown as an individual. And I think that's another great thing, is that everyone gets to see everyone grow, right? They get to witness. Maybe somebody met you earlier on when you hadn't had as much speaking experience, or you hadn't had as much experience in leadership roles, and now they've seen you move up, and then they see, well, if you can do it, maybe I can try, and start gaining more courage. I want to bring up a couple of points that I would love for us to just chat about and bring up. And before I bring up these couple of points, Desiree, I want you to talk about the women's ecosystem, because I think that knowing where the stats are, knowing exactly where everybody sits, shows people a tremendous amount of windows of opportunity for growth and making a difference and making a change. And you had a huge courage to get it started and talk about a laborly intensive, but also a labor of love. So I want you to talk about that. But I think that we need to surround ourselves with people that help you grow, right? That really push your limits a little bit and kind of push you off the fence. So I'd love to hear stories about that. But you know what? We also need those people that keep you grounded and make sure that, you don't get too big for yourself, but not just from keeping you grounded, but even being realistic about someone being able to see where your strengths are, but maybe some things you need work on too, so that you do continue to grow, because people follow people that are growing. If you stop and stay still at some point, they're not going to follow you, that opportunity to be able to act when you really get the courage to act. I actually read a thing about John Bon Jovi, of all people, over the weekend, and he drove around. He put, this is how long ago it was, he put cassettes everywhere, right? He sent out all of his tracks of everything he did music wise. And there was a radio station near where he lived that he listened to all the time, and it was all his genre. And he drove around that building for years, literally drove around the building for years, overheard the guy, the disc jockey, mentioning a favorite pizza, and brought the pizza in when he knew he was taking a break, had the courage to bring a pizza in. And then he asked if he had any demos. He played the demos, and obviously the rest is history. But it was that 10 seconds of courage of being able to act. So I would love for people to be able to share something in any one of those three categories. But Desiree, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the women's ecosystem. So I'd love for you to do that.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah. So the ecosystem was really brought together 5 years ago. If you think about each one of you coming from different industries, different journeys, and how you've grown, and each one of you I could relate to in a very personal way, and how I met you and what has transpired. And the thing is that we are now, because of the pandemic, if you think about it, we have much more of a global presence. But the reality is that we're living in silos. We're not going outside of that box. And so what we did with the ecosystem is we really want to connect the dots to make sure we don't lose our humanity, that we are really connecting, that there's a purpose, there's a train. And so if you think about the aspect that we're only as strong as our weakest link. So the reality is, like, if I look at Marcia right now, when she had the Empower, you were able to go into that safe zone, and you were able to actually talk to people that you've never even met before and go up to them and say, I have a problem. And you felt the desire to actually open that door to have a conversation, and everyone would join in, and then they would start talking about their reality and not be on a surface level. And if you look at Marcia, you look at Rebecca, and you talk about what she went through, you know, the ability to still, she co-founded the NDILC with me, because she's the one that says, Desiree, I want to mentor, I want to do this at the leadership level, I want to take it down. And I'm like, you just went through this ringer, and she says, I've got to do this. And look at where we are today. You know, so the ecosystem, he came in, and I met Chitra, you know, 5 years ago at a conference, and I just was blown away of her ability to, you know, read 5,000 documents all at once and say what we're going to do through a financial crisis. So as I went, and Erica, you know, we met at a conference, and we were talking about, you know, what she went through as a government. You don't know what she did back in the military, what she was behind enemy lines, and as a helicopter pilot, rescuing the veterans and keeping them safe in the military. So as my energy went, I said, how do we connect these silos? And the reality is the NAWRB report came together. So we have 6 volumes. We have D&I, we have the business ownership. If you talk about family offices down to small businesses, which is the biggest, you know, talk of the town, how small businesses are being sustainable, how the PPP loans. So we were part of the SBA. We've been with them for 11 years as a national resource partner for women-owned businesses. So if you have a problem, how do you relate to that? Then you go into the STEM. We talk about all the different, you know, Chitra was very gracious to help us with the ability that things are designed as for men, but not just the software side. That's a physical element of a home, of the apparatus that you're using, the technical part of it. And then you go into the aging population, which is okay. If you think about it, in 2019, our conference was about what? Aging population, quality of life, and healthcare. What was 2020? That was powerful to think about that. So then you go into the fact is that you look at access to capital, how we're getting institutionalized. You're talking, Marcia, about all the money and the changes of what you're doing because you run all the different finances at different levels. Well, what about the family office money? What about the non-institutional? What about the JVs? What about all the different levels of money being, because institutionally they're being more reserved, you know, because we went through the financial crisis back in 2008 and 2009. So that, and then you look at, you know, Teresa, when I met her, she was, you know, I saw her at NAWRB and, you know, be the president. I said, girl, you got to be at our conference. So that has evolved. And so when she got her promotion to becoming the diversity inclusion leadership officer, you know, what is that involved in? How do we embrace all that? So that being said, this is how we connected the dots to make sure from statistics, women outliving men by 5 years. The average age is 49.5, taking care of the aging population. Yet you still, as a care provider, you still have children. What if you're doing homeschooling right now? And then also, what if you have sibling issues? So those statistics are huge because the women are the ones that are being the multitasking, taking care of the aging population, still raising the kids and still birthing. You know, I have 4 kids, you know, a lot of us have kids. So what does that involve with the pandemic, right? So if we connect those dots, then we can help better, sustainable quality of life, because we're never going to go back. We're going to be different. So some of the statistics is 60% of the jobs haven't been created for the future because of the environment that we're living in and continue to be living. So how do we, one of the things that I love to talk about is how do we change the environment that we're living in, our centuries? Right now, I get to see you, but do I get to see what you're wearing below? Do I get to see what, I mean, Teresa, right? Teresa made a comment about love. Teresa made a comment about Marsha's Empower in the back, right? The empowerment of women. We got to see instead of having a blank wall. We don't get to have the environment. Oh, the wind's blowing. Let's go have a cup of coffee and dig deep into our conversations. We're losing our humanity of being able to connect in the centuries. So the ecosystem report was really connected to, we can keep why we don't have a broken link, and we can keep our relationships and communication of the different industries, because we can't be so siloed.
Wow. So I want to grow up and be you women. That's it in a nutshell. But who wants to share something on whether it's somebody that helped keep you grounded, or somebody that you've helped keep grounded, or somebody that you've been a positive influence on, or that has been an influence on you, or an act of courage, whether you've witnessed it yourself or you've, obviously we've shared a lot of it today, but, or one that you've done yourself. Who wants to share?
I'll jump in here, Tami. So when I was fairly young in my career, I had been in the workplace for about 8 or 9 years, and I was very proficient in the area that I was managing, right? I was a technician, and then you keep getting promoted, and all of a sudden you're running the area, you know, and you feel very safe and confident because you have all of those skills. You know how to do the job that your team is doing, and you know where you're going to take them and lead them. And one day my boss took me out to lunch and asked me what my career aspirations were. And at first I was like, well, what do you mean? I'm doing really well here. And he said, well, at some point you're going to reach the ceiling of this profession that you're in. Like you're very technical and you're good, but what other skills would you bring to the plate in order to show a full resume of different experiences? And I didn't figure it out right away, but he was setting me up because he wanted me to run another department, one that I wasn't technically, down deep in, something where I didn't have professional training in the area that I would be managing. And I said, are you crazy? I haven't done those jobs. He goes, you don't need to have done those jobs. You have talented professionals who've done those jobs. I want you to do this because you have the leadership skills I need to make sure that department is going to be successful. And he listed all of these things that he needed. So I did take a leap of faith and I took a risk. And I went over and I started managing this other area. And I had to give up the area that I knew was my comfort zone. And so it took a strong mentor to give me that feedback, right? And to say, I have your back. If you are unsure about anything, I'm right here. But in order, one, I think you can do this. But two, you're not seeing where we're seeing the value. So as the leadership would look at me, they were seeing value in me that I wasn't seeing in myself, because I was still thinking they wanted me there because when I first got hired, I was very technical. And so I think it's really important. And we talked about risk taking. We've talked about being authentic, and we've talked about having those voices in your head. When I went into that role, that I had to trust my staff to, when they came up with ways to handle difficult situations, that they were more technically proficient than I was, right? So you had to build that trust, and you also had to trust, I had to trust my manager that he would have my back if I made the unfortunate, wrong decision or whatever it would be. And so it really changed the course of my career. If I hadn't taken that risk, I wouldn't have grown and then moved in. It gave me the confidence to start leading other areas because I knew I didn't have to be so, again, technically proficient, because again, when you're coming up through an organization and you're rewarded for being that technical asset, it's hard to wrap your head around that they want you for your leadership. So I just encourage people to be authentic, take some risks, and also, help people out if they're struggling. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have my boss and that team to bounce things off of. And, they showed up. And so I just think it's something that we all can do when we look across our organizations, is give others the opportunity to do some things that they may, that they can be successful at, but they may be unsure if they would be.
I love that. I love that. And I think it is really true. Catching people doing something good, finding a skill set in them and shining a light on it so that they are, but they have to be in a pretty safe environment in order to be able to do that. Desiree, I think this is supposed to be 45 minutes. Am I right? Correct?
Yes.
So we're hitting the time. I want to thank everybody. The more I get to see you beautiful women, the more I am impressed with everything that you've accomplished. And I'm really honored to get to even be here. So thank you so much for today. I think that it was great, and hopefully people picked up some great tips. I know I did.
Thank you for
Thank you,
listening.
Tammy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much,
Thank
Tami.
everyone.
Just closing real quick. So next month is going to be Know Yourself. Marsha Davies is going to be hosting it on April 1st. So make sure you tune in again for Facebook Live. The beautiful thing about this is that we're all connecting, and this is a great energy that's bringing it. And we had the best reviews today. So thank you everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. So be safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See y'all next month.
Yes.
Guys.